probably awkward. That's, the meeting's being recorded, by the way. It's a little warning that I just got. So,
subscribe to our YouTube page.
Oh yeah, yeah. So we are recording this, and for those that are interested, subscribe to the YouTube page. These will go out onto YouTube. You can catch up later on, miss parts, or watch again parts that you might have missed during the actual presentation and that. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and get started. Once again, thank you for a good number of people here that are in attendance tonight. This is our second, I'm going to call it our hybrid meeting, where we're doing it in person and via Zoom. I think we're going to be able to do it with this structure, for most of the meetings going forward. I encourage you to, if you do have the opportunity to come here and meet in person, it really is like I said, a fun environment that we've got here. But for those that logistically can't make it, understand, and hopefully the Zoom platform continues to work. Let's see here. With that, regarding the meetings that we're still trying to figure out whether we can do them via the hybrid, we're going to try it with the next meeting, and that is the competition nights. But what we're going to do is we do have one in, I guess it's in about 3 weeks, it's July 7th. And we're going to do that one, but we're going to try and do it via the hybrid method. And what we'll do is we won't have actual prints for that one. We'll do it just, again, all digital entries in that. I think we're allowing 3 entries per member. And so that one will be on July 7th. And then we do have one meeting that's scheduled on August 18th that we're going to have to do online because it's the presenter actually lives in, I think it's in New York, but Tim Gray, he's going to be doing a presentation on photo pills, and he's got his platform that we're going to be jumping on for that one. But aside from that, we're going to try and do hopefully most of these meetings here in person. As far as upcoming events, I'm going to go through these here real quickly. We've got, I just mentioned July 7th. That's a competition night. I think most of the members hopefully received a email just yesterday that came out on that one. The themes are water and portals. And considering that water can be any form of water, so think of snow, ice, clouds. I guess that could be considered vaporized water, steam. And then for portals, think of things such as windows, doors, caves, tunnels, etc. So that'll be July 7th, and entries for that one will be due July 4th. That's 4th of July, the Sunday. And so that'll be our July 7th competition night. Later in July, we have the scavenger hunt. July 21st is the date that I have here. Bruce he'll be working on some of the details for that. Last year's format worked well, where we had a list of things that you go out and, as the scavenger hunt, photograph different items that are on the list that he provides. And same as last year, we're going to give, a few days for people to go out and get the images, so you don't have to kind of rush through it all in one night. And then we'll have a follow-up meeting, and that we'll go through the images that people come up with. The next meeting after that is August 4th, and we have that designated as an exhibition night. We just did one of those a couple weeks ago. I know I always benefit from those quite a bit. We still have 2 exhibition nights this year, and so whether it will be that one or the one that'll be, I guess, a few months after that, we may do what we did. We had a deal that we did last year where we took 2 photos, everybody got the same 2 photos, everybody goes out and does their own processing and then brings them back. And I thought that was a lot of fun too, just to see how different people process the same 2 images and how different the images looked over the course of the evening. So that'll either be the August 4th, or I think it's October would be the other exhibition night. So we'll try and incorporate one of those, that format into one of those. I mentioned that August 18th, we have a presentation. Tim Gray is going to be presenting on photo pills. For those who aren't familiar with that, it's a real popular phone app for landscape photography. It helps with night photography, sun positions, moon positions, hyperfocal distance, long exposure calculations. It's a really valuable tool, and I think it's only like $10 or something like that to get the app. So if you have a chance to get the app in advance, and then you'll be ahead of the game as far as learning more from that August 18th presentation. In September, that'll be our next competition. That'll be an open competition. That's September 1st, I have as the date. September 15th, we're going to have Quirino, who's here tonight, and Ashley. They were our 2020 Photographers of the Year. They're going to present on how they got to be so successful so quickly. I think when they were both Photographers of the Year last year in 2020, both of them had only been photographing for about 2 years. So be really curious to see how they share their wisdom in terms of how they got to be so successful so quickly. October 6th, I've got an exhibition night. So again, as I mentioned earlier, either that one or the August one, we'll try and incorporate the 2 photos that everybody receives, processes, and turns in, and we go into discussion. November 3rd is a competition night. That will be likely a themed event, and we will come up with a theme. So we don't have those identified yet, but we'll try and give you a little bit more advanced notice before we get to that one. And then November 14th, we'll have what was supposed to be tonight. Joseph Roybar was going to be presenting tonight on color theory for landscape photography. He just happens to be in Iceland photographing the volcano, I think is what he was going there for in that. So he was unavailable for tonight. So I will be presenting tonight on infrared photography, and Quirino will be giving some demonstrations on some interesting processing that he does with the Topaz Labs products. And then the final meeting of the year will be December 1st. That one will be our board elections. Typically, we do that one as a potluck event. So I'm thinking we can probably do that again this year. We will have the room for that.
Yeah, we've got all our dates.
All our dates. So yeah, that's the first day of December. And again, potluck dinner, and we'll have board elections that evening also. So that's all I have on the agenda as far as upcoming events. What I'll do is, I don't know if anybody has any questions with regards to those. If not, like I say, we'll go ahead and go into tonight's presentation. Again, thank you, Quirino, for stepping in tonight. Again, it was sort of last minute. We had, like I say, Joseph Roybar, who was scheduled to present tonight. Quirino's going to go, I think he said his presentation goes for about 40 minutes or so, something like that. And then after that, I'm going to give a quick, probably about a 45-minute presentation also on infrared photography. So with that, we're going to switch and have Ryno bring up his screen, share his screen, and he's going to show us the magic of Topaz. Which program is it? Topaz Studio 2. Okay, thank you.
Yes, it is. There we go. Okay. There you go. Yeah, my name is Quirino Zaragosa, and today I'm going to talk a little bit about Topaz Studio 2 and how to make photos into paintings. As Mike said, I've been with the Photo Club for about 2.5 years, and that's when I started photography is 2.5 years ago with the Photo Club here. And when I first got here, I wasn't sure what type of photographer I was going to be. I mean, we have landscape and night photography, and I kind of drifted over towards wildlife because I enjoy being outside, and it gets me out and gets me walking. So most of my portfolio I have, I would say is wildlife photography. I've got, like I said, a bunch of images of different animals, and I got about 5% macro images. I like doing macro photography also. So I was wondering, how could I change these into a photo? So last month, my wife and I were talking and we said, you know what? Let's redecorate our apartment here. And I thought, well, this would be an awesome opportunity for me to use some of my photos in here. So I pulled out my photos and I went through all 3,000 photos and I didn't find one photo that I would put on the wall. I didn't find anything because my personal preference, I like paintings. I don't want a photo on a wall. I want a painting. That's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for something with colors. I'm not looking for the subject. The subject is secondary. The colors in the photograph is what I'm looking for. So I can manipulate them and use them when I redecorate my home so it matches the colors in my home. So I was looking around thinking, I know I've seen this before, that somebody's done this. And when I joined this photo club here, the second month I was here, you had a gentleman here called Weldon Lee, and he was doing the same thing. And he was taking wildlife photography photos and manipulating them and changing them into paintings. But at the time, I wasn't very much interested. I thought it was a cool process, but I was still learning how to take a photo. I didn't know how to take a photo. So that was going to come secondary. So I found another place online here that was showing that Topaz Lab Studio 2 has a process there called impressions filter that changes this into a painting. So I've had Topaz for a couple of years now, and I said, well, let's try this out. Let's see what it does. And it does a pretty amazing job of changing those photos to paintings. So what I would like to do with you guys is take a couple of photos here and go through them and show you what I do to change them into a painting. And I noticed on the last, when I brought these photos in for the exhibition night, a couple of people expressed some interest in it. So I thought I'd bring these photos to you and let's work on some and see how they work here. So we'll start off with this image here. A lot of people wanted to see this image as it was before it was changed into a painting. And this is a magpie and a coyote over at Cherry Creek State Park. And they're just kind of hanging out with each other, not bugging each other. And the coyote's not actually right behind the magpie. The magpie's probably a foot off to one side. So it kind of looks like he is smelling the magpie, but he's not. So here I'm in Topaz Studio 2 right here. And I don't know if any of you folks have this program, but to get to the impressions filter, we just go over to the right-hand side where it says add filter. And we click on that. And there's three portions to get to it. There's the essentials, creative, and stylistic. So we go down into the stylistic, into the impressions filter, and let's click on that guy. And then it'll revert this picture into a painting. And the little boxes you see down here on the bottom right, this is the controls for the paintings. You can adjust these paintings. You can make them look more painterly. You can make them look more detailed. So there's a lot of adjustments on here that you can use with these photos. You can change the colors. There's just a lot of things you can do with this program. So right here, we got the opacity. You can bring the opacity down if you want to. Got the blend modes here, all the blend modes, just like in Photoshop, if you want to try and play with those. Also, too, these strokes right here, what these are what you would see if that paintbrush touched a piece of paper. Those are the paintbrushes that are in the Topaz Studio. And one thing here is when you first start off, I'll show you here. If you first start off, you'll see some white lines in some of the strokes. And I don't like those white lines in there. Some people use that, they use that canvas in the background. They'll change the color and use the colored canvas as a beginning portion to start their paintings. So what I do to get rid of this white background is I just go over to the right-hand side here and I scroll all the way down to the bottom where it says texture there. Click on texture, and then I just continue scrolling down till I get to the very bottom where it says background type. And there's solid and original. So say, for example, I wanted to keep that canvas in the background there, but I don't want it white. I wanted it another color. So we can just go to background here. See, I want to change it to this color here. Now my background, my canvas is a yellow color. And I can start with that and add more paint to this and change this photo as I go along. But I usually don't do it that way. I like the original where it brings everything back to the original colors. Now it's all back to original. Then what I do is I go all the way back up to the top where the strokes are. And then you notice here too where you see the different paintbrushes. On the bottom here it says number of strokes. Right now it's defaulted to medium. That's where it starts at all the time. But if you want it more painterly, you would go with the low setting. If you want more detail, you just go with the high setting. Also too, with these brushes here, with the smaller brush, with the thinner brush, you get more detail. With a wider brush, you get less detail. Like I said, if you go down to the medium low, it brings it gives it more of a painterly look. So and then also here at the bottom are some presets right here at the very bottom. You click on the presets here. There's about 8 different presets in here that you can use if you want to. You can just click on these guys and it'll make it into a pastel painting, oil painting. And all these two are adjustable. You can go in there and change everything on there, the paint stroke, whatever you want to do. So I usually don't use the presets. I like the brushes, the strokes. So what I do here, when I'm looking for a more painterly photo, I'll go to medium, and then I just start going through the brushes, seeing something that I like. And like I said, I don't want a detailed picture, so I would stay away from these thin brushes and kind of stay with a thicker brush. And this brush really gives it a lot of detail. And if you put it on high, it really brings out all the detail. And then at the very end of these brushes are some really different types of round brush techniques. We're giving this a painterly look. But I'm kind of leaning more towards something up here. Probably something maybe like that, where I don't really see all the details in the coyote. So once I've picked the stroke that I want, or the brush, then I can come down to the fine adjustments, like the brush size. The brush size, if you take it to the left, you get more detail. You take it to the right, you get less detail. So it depends on the look that you're looking for. You can play around with it and make it as painterly as you like, or as make it back into a photograph. And what I found too is when you do some of these photographs, say for example, you see what it does to the background, how it gives it a nice creamy background. What you could do is when you have an animal in the front here or a subject, you can use a mask off that subject. And then now you have this crystal clear subject, but this beautiful blurry background. The next control here, paint volume. Move that around, see what it does. Seems like it makes it lighter. And that's what I basically do, is I just go through all these brushes and I move them around. I see what they do, what the effects that they give here. Paint opacity, you're just bringing down the amount of paint that's on there. I like to bring up paint because, like I said, I'm looking for more of a painting. Stroke rotation, this way you can change the directions of the strokes in the paintings. know if you can see it in the background there, but there's some change going on there. Also the rotation, you can change the rotation of the brushes in here. And then there's a color stroke variation where it adds color to the individual strokes in the painting. So if that's what you like in your painting, then that's what you can add to it or reduce it.
Real quick. Real quick, there was a question that Ashley brought up as to where do we mask off in Topaz Studio?
Well, the Topaz Studio you don't. What I do is I do all the processing in Lightroom and Photoshop. And if I'm going to mask something off, I'm going to Photoshop, mask it off, and then you can just take the masked area into the Topaz Studio and do that.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
But yeah, there's no masking in here in these in this filter. So as I say, I just work my way down and I just start playing with these little controls and see what they do. And when I find something that suits my eye, that's where I leave it. The spill here is kind of, it blends the colors into the next one. And I don't want too much spill. The one button I do like here, I like the smudge button, especially when you have an animal with a lot of fur. You see what it does to the fur? See, like here on the smudge, I'll bring the smudge up a little bit. And you'll see what it's doing to the fur. It kind of gives it a really neat, a real different look. And I find that it does that to other textures too, to rock and other different textures. It smooths them out, kind of makes it look different. So the next one here is, it's called coverage. And what this is here, there's a coverage and a coverage transition. What this is here is, say for example, in the center of this photo, that's where you want to start the transition where it's changing from a photo to a picture. So as you see it here, the dots in the middle, and as I change up the coverage, you'll see in the center of the picture it's starting to get kind of blurry. See that? Right in the center of his neck, it's starting to get, now it's going back. What it does, it starts to get blurry. So it's working its way from the center out. The center is starting the effect, and it's lessening the effect as it goes out. And if you put the coverage to full, then then everything's covered, and you don't need the slider below it. And also here, the painting progress. If you bring this back down, my froze. Looks like it's froze here.
Screen share and re-screen share.
Nope. Still not coming up here. Anyway, this is the painting progress kind of reduces the amount of paint that goes into the picture here. So you go to the right, it reduces the paint. You go to the left, it increases the paint. Let me close this off here. Let me get this started again. Maybe something happened. I can't even get it to close. Yeah, I'm gonna have to restart it again here.
Yeah. Yeah. And trying to shut it down.
Okay, we'll bring that up again here. But anyway, you can see as when you bring these photos in here, when you bring these photos in here, you can really manipulate the way they are. You can change the like I said, the way they look, the colors. Let me get down, Kane. We'll go down to the color process. And here you can go down and change the colors of different things in here if you wanted to. Say like here, I want to change the background a little bit. So you can come in here and change these colors, change them the way you want them. There's a section here for lighting, basically like Lightroom and Photoshop, you know, brightness, contrast, highlight, and shadow. This portion here says light position. This is for when you put a texture on this. And I'll show you that right now when we get down to that's the next one down. And then here, vignette. It's got a section here to add a vignette, but I don't usually use this one. There's another one in Topaz that I use, which I like. And then the last button here is textures. So with this painting, if you wanted to add a texture to it, you can come in here and say you want to add this guy here. And it shows up right in as a texture on your picture. And there's several different textures in here: canvas, concrete. No, I looked on that, but yeah, you can upload your own textures here. But there's different textures here that you can use. And also in the textures portion, say for example, you have this one here. And you got this big texture here. You can make the texture strength bigger. You can decrease it. You can increase the size of the texture. Well, you can get away from that pattern. Say you want to go to like this one, rough asphalt, or I can go to something else, you know. I'm just using this one as an example for the next little portion I wanted to show you here. And that's the light position. So you see on your texture here, this light position is putting the shadows on these textures. So if you wanted the light coming from this side on your texture, you just click this little button, move it over. So you can even adjust the textures if you wanted to, the light that's shining on them.
You mentioned earlier that you were using you're using this in conjunction with Photoshop. So you're creating layers over there? Are you using this as a plugin over into Photoshop?
Yes, as a plugin.
Okay. And so Aaron's question earlier is whether you can use other textures. If you have other textures on your computer, you could probably bring those into a different layer over in Photoshop and work that in. You just wouldn't be able to use some of these other. Right.
Yeah, what I do is like say for example, this coyote, I didn't like the background. So I would make a mask of the animal, and then I have my own backgrounds that I've went out and taken pictures of, put that background in there, and then bring them both together, and then yes. Yes. Yeah, I do all the masking in Photoshop.
You can separate the animal out, his legs out from the grasses.
Mm-hmm. And that's what's nice about this is that because it's distorted, it doesn't have to be exact. So when you're coloring him out for later, it doesn't have to be exact.
Overkill, kind of what I would call it. What does it do to the noise level in the photo when you does it affect?
Well, I'm not really concerned about noise because if you look at the texture on here, it doesn't matter if you have noise or not, because there is a texture to the painting. And that's the nice thing about this too, is that, you know, I've done some experimenting with it. Your photo doesn't have to be that great. I mean, if you're just looking for color and you're looking for something, a subject in there, you know, you can put them in there, and it doesn't matter if they're focused. It doesn't matter how grainy it is. You know, none of that matters, because you're basically, you're painting it.
I think what happens is actually kind of the actual. Because it's
You're
smoothing.
blurring it,
Yeah, it's smoothing things out. So I think, you know, if you were just to do all of this in Photoshop, you can't. But
Right.
because you're doing it in a program that's more painterly, it's actually going to reduce it. Yeah.
Yeah, I have no problem. Like I said, I've taken some photos that I thought, you know, they're not very good. They're not in.
fact, I would bet there's a way to just use this program.
And like I said, it depends how painterly you want to be. I mean, you can have the animal perfectly clear, you know, and just have the background. And I've done that with a few things where I just I do the background. I want the background nice and blurry and milky like they have it on here. So I'll separate the two. Let me do another one for you. Here's another image I had at the presentation night. And, you know, if you have a nice background to begin with, it really helps when you do this technique. And like I said, I just take it into, I do all my editing. Everything is done in Photoshop or Lightroom. You know, usually it's Lightroom. And I only go in Photoshop when I need to do some erasing or getting rid of some things in there. But yeah, everything is done there. So here we go again. We'll just go back down to impressions. And right away, it'll render it into a painting. And then as you notice, once again, there's all those little white marks all over the painting there. That's the canvas coming through. So you go all the way down to the very bottom to the texture. All the way down to the very bottom where it says background type. And then just click original. Then it'll get rid of all that up there. And then say like this one, you know, I kind of like the bird. I like the feathers on him. I like the way his feathers are. So I may want to go with a smaller brush. I may want some more detail in those feathers. Or maybe something like that, or like this. See, and this one's really detailed.
Yeah.
Okay.
I know for you working on it, you want to see it full out. But for us, I think.
Sure. Sure. You can see. How's it like that?
Yeah.
Okay. Let me go back up to the top and you can see the effects on the. Oh. Yeah.
I don't like that brush.
Yeah.
I want a different brush.
But you can see the effects of it, does it? The bigger the brush, the not very detailed. But if we go to a little smaller brush, then we got some more detail in there. Now I really can see some of those feathers. I can see his eye. And then we'll just go down and we'll take it down a little bit to low. No, you know what? I don't like low. I want to bring it up. Okay, I like the way he's looked there. I like the background. But then I don't like that rock. I want to make that rock look a little dreamy too. So I'll screw down here. I'll scroll down to the bottom here. And that's where I like the smudge. The smudge kind of, see what it's doing to the rock?
Is it just doing it to the rock?
No, it's doing it to everything.
Oh, so you'd have, if you didn't want it to apply it to the face of the bird, you'd have to take it into Photoshop and map that out.
Yes, but the way it looks now, I like it the way it is now. 'Cause see, it's, like I said, it's all a personal preference on what everybody likes, you know, it's, in here, I'm just trying to get some of the rock to get a little dreamy there. The bird, he's, like I said, he's going to be out of focus anyway. So I'm going to smudge him a little bit. And if I wanted to come down and let's see what happens with the colors. See, and I would be happy with just something like this. Because I like the colors.
So when you click on it, it goes back to the original.
Yes, well, I can click on it and it'll be original. Mhm. That's original. But, and then like this one too, you know, I say you do like the background, you just want the background. I want the smooth background. Here again, just go into Photoshop, mask him out, and then just do the background. Do the background in the rock. And then you come back with a perfectly focused bird.
And then put it back together in Photoshop.
When you open this in the Photoshop, it opens it.
Yes. Mhm. Yeah, it just comes in. So like I said, this one was pretty easy. You know, the background was already nice. The bird was already nice. All I wanted to do was just kind of smooth them out a little bit. So easy to do. Any questions?
Do you have a discount code for the Topaz?
No, I don't work for those guys. Yes. No, well, there's another program in Photoshop that does oil paintings. And that's under filters, and I think filters, stylized and oil painting. But there's only like, I think there's 4 or 5 different filters in there, and not a whole lot of control what you can do with the, like you can with here. But like I said, it's a neat tool that, you know, if you want a nice background, you can isolate the subject, get a beautiful background, or if you want the whole thing painterly, you can get the whole thing painterly if you want. But there's just a lot of things you can do with it. And also, like I said, if you're looking for more info on it, on YouTube, there's a gentleman called Dave Kelly, and he's called The Joy of Editing. And he has tons and tons of videos on Topaz Studios, Silver Effects, the TK7 panel, and Luminar.
Dave Kelly, you said?
His name's Dave Kelly.
K-E-L-L-E.
K-E-L-L-Y. Yeah, and it's called The Joy of Editing. So he does a lot of this kind of stuff. And then there's another gentleman named Jim Nix that he does some of this, but he's mostly does Luminar and things like that. So he's on there. And then also Topaz Labs has some videos out too on how to do some of these. But like I said, it's an interesting tool to play with and experiment, you know, when you got some photos that you're trying to match a color for some room or some decorating idea. It's a neat tool to use.
And one of the things you brought up too is that your image doesn't have to be tack sharp, and you can kind of get away with images that are less than perfect. So I have plenty of candidates for that.
Yeah, like I said, if you're looking for colors or something to add color to something, that's kind of the route to go, I think.
Right.
Any questions?
Does anybody on the Zoom platform have any questions?
Can you hear me? This is Charlie.
Yeah.
Okay, I actually use Topaz Studio 2 almost every image, but I tend to use like a clear AI, and because it does a little sharpening and gets rid of noise. But I use impressions a lot too, and I use actually the separate impressions, not the one built in the studio. I think it's a lot more powerful than the one in actually Topaz Studio. And I use a preset Ed Hopper preset, but I modified it quite a bit. And I just apply very lightly, and it helps me get rid of noise too, and on images. And it also gives like a smoothing effect, but it keeps it sharp. And I have an image at the Exploring the Light show, and I used it on that. So it might be a good example if you happen to go by the show. Like I said, it smooths it out a little bit, but it keeps the sharpness still. That's pretty much all I had to add. So.
What program you said that was? It was Topaz?
It's Topaz Impressions, but it's a standalone application. Not just the one that's built into Topaz Studio. And like I said, I think it's a lot more powerful. If you use Topaz Impressions, it's kind of good to go through the different presets to see some of the effects that people can get from the different presets. I use the O'Keefe preset a fair amount, the Ed Hopper quite a bit, and a smudge one as well. But I use them very lightly, and I have my own modifications to them that I use my own presets. So basically, it's a great tool. Topaz makes some great products.
Yeah, they make some good products. Their denoise and sharpening is unbelievable.
Yeah, I used to use AI Clear all the time for sharpening and getting rid of noise, but the sharpening AI is probably is far better.
Mhm.
Kathy has it.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Good. This is more of a philosophical question rather than technical, but I'm wondering, with so much available with Lightroom, Photoshop, and now with Topaz, if we need to think differently then as far as how we critique and judge our photos, or a special category, or those kinds of things. I mean, just even noise reduction, how much we manipulate something. Should we just stick with the overall impression, or is how much it gets changed, really a factor, or should it be a factor?
Yeah, that's a good question, Kathy. I hadn't thought of that, and it came up last week or I guess 2 weeks ago when Quirino first demonstrated these when we had our exhibition night, and we talked about how impressive they were and so forth, and how different they were from what we normally see. But that's a good question as far as in terms of, should we have it as a separate category for competitions? Should say like in an open competition?
And I think I saw Tom in the room there.
Yes.
As a judge, if this is even being discussed among the other judges for the shows, if it's come up at all.
I haven't. I see that there are some clubs that I've judged do separate categories, like they'll have a creative category, and they have pretty strict rules about compositing, and I think it is kind of difficult to, judge all these photos in one group, because it takes different skill sets to create them. So I think identifying and separating them out is a good idea. I have noticed in general a lot of argument about different artistic styles in photography. And is that really a photo? I hear that crap all the time. Because I do some, and I'm more of an artist than a photographer now, I think, maybe. I don't know. But so it's a big philosophical question that maybe the group ought to look at.
Yeah, I mean, because if I think about, there also is the artistic side of it that we see that's not through processing, but or maybe you can also do it that way. But we even had somebody present just a few months ago, Elise Bender, and some of, I mean, she was doing it on, digital, I'll say impressionistic type of photography. Now hers wasn't so much out of, using the post-processing. A lot of hers were, 2 images, and intentional camera movement and so forth and that. But, is there a distinction between using that technique versus using something like a Topaz impressions when it comes to something that we'll need to think about.
Something to think about and continue to discuss.
Club where I know a photographer was using a software. I can't remember the name of the software. A couple clicks, changed the whole image, and I knew what they were doing, and I just didn't judge it very high because it just, to me, didn't seem like it, merited any skill. It just gimmick. So I think that this is artistic, but it's a really tough thing,
And to Quirino's point, I mean, they look very good on walls.
Absolutely.
As far as I could see the saleability of them, so forth, and the marketability of it. But from if you're comparing that image with something that is a really good portrait or a really top-notch, say landscape photo or something, are they comparable from a judging standpoint?
Judging is a whole different game. When you get into the art genre, I think it's more open because it's just art.
But if you, like years ago, Joe Bennett did a presentation. I think it was the water. And holy cow, what is that photo? I mean, I wouldn't consider it a photo anymore. But it was his interpretation of what I had no idea that he took things to that extent.
So I
hear you going through, and I'm not saying it's a bad thing, I'm just saying.
No.
Painting steps and that type of stuff, but then, so I think, in comparison that these guys are making, it's like, okay, how much
Exactly.
how much warping, how much stretching, how much, sky replacement, color replacement, all of those types of things that it's like, is that any different?
If you click the shutter, do whatever you want.
Agreed.
I don't care. I do not care.
You use a camera as a photo.
So,
I understand, but I mean, in the world.
so they're saying they can't hear it.
Yes.
Oh, they can't? I just used the TV. I didn't use the speaker.
Are you on mute or
He's
Can you hear that now? I saw your message.
People don't realize that. Yeah. Going back to I specifically remember
She
that
says
image because
they can hear it, but it's too far.
Doug submitted it. They got those 68 criteria, they did 12 minutes. They did that one. And then they did it high and then not again. And they made it. So in my opinion, the end photograph that got him the merit was not his image. It was his editing based on their criteria. So you got 10 or 12 people telling you what you should do to your image. And say, okay, you guys do this, if you do this to your image, we'll accept it. And I don't agree with that. That's my
How do you know that someone?
You asked for a lot in environment.
And you go forensically. I mean, that's what I do.
And that's what we talked about in the last meeting, was showing the before and after. Because for some people, if you don't know what's possible, you don't know what's possible. So it would help them be like, holy cow, I didn't know you could do that. Well, you can do that,
what he in my mind, because I like had no idea like what he started with, and I was like, oh gosh, I don't do that now. In the gallery,
All of our raw photos look the same. I'll tell you that. It's all in the editing, polishing the diamond to make it shine. All it is.
Big discussion. I just want to decorate my house.
You're doing a great job. You're doing great.
Well, not the original ones, the ones that are fuzzy and stuff. She likes those.
Bring it.
Just kick the-
what was my eye, what did, how I processed the photo, what did my eye do when I was out there? What was the light, you know, all the different elements, and I could recreate what I saw.
I'm surprised by how many people are now thinking of business cards like visual artists versus just like photographer.
I just look at it like Bob Ross says, you know, this is my world. This is my world. It's my own little world. I'll make it any way I want to.
You talk about the perspective of judging, and I spent many years in Southern California, and was okay. You will turn in your Kodachrome, Actachrome, Fujichrome slides that you use to start it. And when I was taking pictures, when I started,
Yeah, that's what we did too.
you didn't catch it with the camera. You didn't get the
pollen on the back end, back leg is long. Tough dark. There was no compositing, there was no fixing the sky, there was,
you burned it in.
I remember
Spending years, well, years, but years learning, hours in a darkroom to put an image in an archway for the college catalog. That is impossible because the building faces this way, the bell tower's over here. But I took the picture and everybody said, God, that's really striking. Where'd you take that? Nowhere.
I think what you brought up is the technology is the key answer here. When you're talking about film, you know, and the majority of the people, the general public, think of photography that don't know about editing. They think, well, you took it in your camera, so what I see is what you saw. And that's their whole impression of what photography is. That's what they think it is. So when something is added or subtracted, it's hard for them. And they feel kind of fake, they feel they feel cheated. Like, well, I thought that's what you saw, you know, and you didn't really see that. And wow. But I think that most people now know that when it's a photo, it's probably not exactly what you thought you saw anymore. Well, it just depends on the public, really. Some people just can't deal with it. Is that Photoshop? I hear that all the time. Is that Photoshop? I go, what does that mean? Photoshop.
Everything is to some extent, right?
Like,
Right,
you have to get into conversations about what a raw photo is.
right.
And how your phone actually edits photos for you. And so, you know.
Yeah, automatically for you. So
Automatically.
it's already, everything is.
Oh, I get that all the time.
I think we should have a discussion channel on this.
That is a good idea. We'll do that.
Tom volunteering to lead that?
Actually, you know, I wouldn't mind doing it. Sure.
I have an entire blog post about company drill. I can share it on my page.
Right.
And it will hold true until the day I die.
And actually, I did a historical reference. I looked back at history of photography. This subject goes back to hundreds of years. Trust me.
Right.
The first composite photo is over 100 years old.
First, as a composite, 100 years old.
Yeah. Put together. Right. Yeah, exactly. It's amazing. And the blade is that. It's good.
Did we solve that? Time to move on.
More to follow. I think we have more to follow on that topic, but thank you, Quirino. That was really educational. That was real helpful. And yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
And I'm doing more than.
So I'm gonna,
Yes, it's fun. I mean, you can make some amazing.
so I'll move on and I'll share my screen now.
Yeah. Can I share your
So I'm gonna
screen?
share my screen and we'll do the infrared presentation. Yeah, we can take a break. It'll take me a minute or two to get this up anyways, right?
Speaking now,
We're taking about a 2 or 3 minute break here and then we'll get started on the next presentation.
Thank you. You know, because you can make.
What I did was I started to my library.
She's have a special category. Have different categories. We'll have an artistic. Whatever you.
that's why I did it.
We did like. Yeah, that's my name. My page. Oh, yeah. You gotta wait. Last year, that winter time, it was so dry. I mean, it was higher as
Yes, so up on there, so I've got this screen, and the next screen, but up there it shows me as muted and.
That's my screen.
That's your screen, okay.
So you should be live.
So I should be live even though I don't have a mute button right here.
Okay, we're gonna get started, so get the background noise down.
If you want to mute yours.
I can just turn it on.
So I won't be able to see the chat. Will you be able to see chat?
I'll watch the chat from up here.
I'll pop back.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just mute yourself. Yeah, just click the mute button.
Oh, this one.
It's mute yourself.
Okay. Oh, I see.
Yeah. See, I have. This is my screen. And then I'll just monitor.
Okay.
I get a pop-up. I got my mouse now, so I need to try it.
Okay. I'm gonna test. real
Okay, you
quick.
guys ready? Yeah. Well,
Okay.
we gotta be quiet for the people online. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you for bearing with us through that. Took a quick break there and getting ready to start my presentation. I just want to make sure, because I can't see now on my screen, I don't have access to the chat. Is everybody there able to hear me? Great. Okay, we'll get started. Once again, thank you, Quirino, for the presentation on the Topaz studio. That was really interesting. So sticking with the concept of, I'll say, artistic images, something that's a little bit different than what our eyes see, I'm going to go ahead and give a presentation here on infrared photography, how to create unique artistic images with infrared. So I'm going to start off with just kind of this is some of the things that I'll be going over tonight is just a little bit quick overview. First of all, what is infrared photography? How images look different from traditional photos and why they look different from traditional photos. What scenarios and subjects work well for infrared. And I also want to give some examples of some that, in my experiences anyways, really don't look all that great in infrared. I'm going to go over some of the basics, camera conversion or specialized filters, mirrorless or DSLR, and then camera settings, white balance, histograms, etc. So some of the, again, part of the overview here is infrared consideration and uses for the following. I'm going to go over primarily what I do a lot of is the landscape and nature, a little bit about people and animals, and then also architecture, buildings, and cityscapes. And then also it's really important with infrared to do some post-processing. In fact, they really don't look all that great if you don't do any post-processing. So I'll go over a little bit of what I use are Lightroom and Photoshop. Mixed Silver Effects Pro, most of the ones that I do, I convert over to black and white with Mixed Silver Effects Pro. But I also have had some limited experience with Capture One, but I know some who do infrared, they use Capture One quite a bit. Some of the resources that I've used for this is one is a infrared photography, digital techniques for artistic images. It's a book that I purchased. And then another resource that I've used quite a bit is a website. It's Spencer's Camera. Just happens to be the place that I sent my camera in for conversion. So on their website, they've got a lot of useful information in that has helped me along the way. And then I also want to give credit to an individual who's kind of giving me some good guidance along the way. Troy Miller, he's a wedding photographer out of Southern California. In fact, for our club, he has judged one of our events, and then he also did a presentation on wedding photography. But he's been doing photography for many years, and he's been doing the infrared for several years. So he was the one who kind of gave me a little bit of a nudge, I guess, to start doing this myself. So first of all, again, moving on through the program and that, again, what is infrared photography? So if we just look at the pure definition of it, infra is Latin for below. And I don't know if it's Latin or not for red, but the second word in there is red. And what it is really is it's infrared light is the light that falls on the total light spectrum below the red portion. What's really key here with the infrared photography is that we're talking about absorbed light versus reflected light. What comes out in the images in that when it's shot in infrared is that the reflected light appears very light and the absorbed light appears very dark. And that's why if you look, we'll go through some of the images here as we go through it and that, but you'll notice that there's certain things that you'll see where they're much lighter than what the eyes would normally see, yet in the same very image, you'll see other parts of it that are darker. So you get a lot of contrast with the infrared photography. Let's see, I just skipped up. Let's see. There we go. And just kind of given, these are the, I guess, three primary, we'll call it spectrums in that of light. There's ultraviolet, and there's what our eyes see, and then there's infrared. So that starting off with what the human eye sees, it's the wavelengths between 380 and 700 nanometers. Ultraviolet are the shorter wavelengths, and those are the ones that are 300 nanometers and below. And then infrared is over at the other end of the spectrum. So that's the waves that are larger than 700 nanometers. Just kind of going back through some of the history of infrared. This actually goes a long ways back also, and we were talking about this earlier in that, but it started off in 1910. There was a physicist, Robert Wood, who originally, I guess, identified the use of infrared. But then it really became a lot more popular when Eastman Kodak's Walter Clark began working with it. And he was using it a lot for aerial surveillance. And then it kind of in that same era, it became really useful for astronomers that were using it for looking at some of the celestial objects and so forth that the human eye couldn't see. Interestingly, it also gained popularity in the 1960s when it kind of the psychedelic era, and there are certain wavelengths within the infrared spectrum and that produce some kind of wild colors, kind of unexpected colors. I haven't really experimented with that. The camera that I had converted doesn't do that. And like I said, I'm doing more the black and white as you'll see. So infrared uses today, today's photographers are using it to capture unique images that look a little bit different from what normally you see, whether it be on social media or, elsewhere and so forth. It just, and I was talking to somebody else who said, when somebody sees an infrared image, a lot of times they look at it and they know it's different, but if they're not familiar with the process or what it is, they don't know what that is, or what it is that's making it different, but just that it is different. And so that's a kind of an explanation as to, why a lot of people are using it to kind of stand out from the crowd. And then the other uses that are going on today is that astronomers do continue to use infrared for their deep space exploration. So going back to the frequencies, like I mentioned, that the infrared is typically above 700 nanometers. So there's different choices of, for those that want to get a camera converted. You'll notice here that the first three on this list, 470, 590, and 665, all have the word color in them. And those are all, again, below that 700 nanometer level. And they produce, like I was mentioning earlier, kind of those psychedelic colors, kind of richer colors, kind of really unique colors in those images. So again, the one that I have, and I highlighted here in yellow, is the 720 nanometer, and that's kind of considered the industry standard for what most people are doing. And then they do have another level above that at 830 nanometers, and that's what they consider for a super black and white image. To be honest, I haven't seen any of those, so I'm not sure exactly what that looks like. So going back to, does it make sense to convert a camera or use specialty filters that will go on the front end of the lens? A couple things to take into consideration here. dedicating a separate camera for infrared use is kind of the way that I went. There is, of course, there is a cost of converting a camera. It's much cheaper if you do here, kind of the second bracket that I have down here is using the infrared filters. Those you just screw a filter onto the front of the camera lens. There's no need for a dedicated camera, and it's a much lower cost. So that brings up the question, why would somebody actually convert a camera to infrared versus going that lower cost? One is that there's certain limitations with the filters. There's the loss of the light. It works out to where it's about a 10 to 15 stop, as if you were using like a neutral density filter. You're going to need a tripod for that. You can't really capture images that are of moving subjects. And you also need to you have to take the filter off, focus, and then put the filter back on in order to get the image. So here's are the benefits of camera conversion. Is one, you can shoot much like you normally do with our other DSLR cameras or mirrorless cameras. You have the ability to autofocus. Tripod's not required. A lot of times you're photographing in lighter light than say sunrise or sunset, so you don't really need a tripod, and much better for photographing moving subjects. As far as the DSLR versus mirrorless, there are some benefits to going with the mirrorless version. With the DSLR, my understanding is that the focal length, you have to send in, if you're going to get a camera converted to DSLR, you actually have to send in a lens with that, and they match the lens to your infrared settings on your camera. Whereas if you're going with the mirrorless version, you don't have to do that. You can just, and in my case, that was a big factor, is that I wanted to make sure that I could still continue to use the existing lenses that I had and not have to be dedicated to one specific lens. I suppose if you were going to go the DSLR route, you'd want to send in a lens that has a wide range, say like a 24 to 120 or something like that. So you have a lot of range with that. But if you go the mirrorless route, then you don't have to consider that. You can use all your other lenses. So again, most settings are similar to the standard digital photography. Be sure and shoot in RAW. I mean, most of us do that anyways with our other photography. So again, no difference there. Histograms, I do the same thing. I try and expose to the right. Standard use of ISO, shutter, aperture, much like we would normally do. The white balance was the one thing that was a little bit different here, is that when I sent my camera in to be converted, they set the Kelvin to 2000, which is the lowest level that is there on my camera. And I'm not sure exactly why that is. It really doesn't matter, because if you're shooting in RAW, it doesn't matter where that Kelvin is. But typically what I've noticed, and I've seen this elsewhere, is that the infrared camera conversions are set to a lower Kelvin setting. So I just wanted to show a couple of images here. This is what they look straight out of camera. So as I mentioned earlier, they're not really that spectacular when you look at them just straight out of camera. You can see here there's kind of that pinkish, orangish tinge that's there. Sorry about that, mouth is getting a little dry. You can see there that there's a, again, it has that kind of pinkish orange tinge. It's not something that, as Quirino was talking about earlier, that some of his images, not something you would hang up on your wall, not exactly in this form. So as I mentioned earlier, you definitely do want to do some post-processing with these images. Another challenge that I've run into is that with hotspots. If you look at these couple of images, these are a couple, it just happens to be, and this is something that it becomes somewhat lens specific. In my case, it just happens to be, I think it's my most expensive lens I've got, is the 70-200 f2.8 lens. That one tends to have hotspots, mostly if I'm shooting in the direction of the sun. If I shoot away from the sun, it's not so bad. But interestingly, though, that's the only lens that I've had this be a consistent problem with. all my other lenses, it really hasn't been much of an issue. So this is, again, I'll go kind of back to, this is a scene there. So not the same composition, but this is one that, you know, same camera, same morning, same general scene. And this is where we get with the, you know, once it's been processed with the, again, the NIC Silver FX Pro. Again, this is kind of a recap of a couple things that I mentioned, but you know, why things look different in infrared. When a scene is illuminated, some of the light waves are absorbed while others are reflected. And it's that luminosity on certain subjects that are catching the light and certain subjects that aren't that make the difference in what we see with the images. So I'm going to go through here several just kind of examples of images. This one I took that same morning up in Rocky Mountain National Park. This was, so when you look at, you know, how dark that sky is, that was just a kind of a bluebird sky day, nothing out of the ordinary, no, obviously no clouds. Would have rather had those in there, but it was, you know, that's just a blue sky. That's, you can get it to go that dark with the infrared. And same thing with the water. If you look at the river down below, it's, you know, kind of a clear flowing stream. That went really dark. And if you take a look at the trees, that's where you're seeing that reflected light versus the absorbed light. So the reflected light with the green, anything, my understanding is chlorophyll is particularly, you know, a material that will, you know, really reflect the light, and it really takes on a different look when it comes to the infrared photography. So this obviously is not infrared, but I'm just giving it as an example to show what happens even with fall colors when you shoot those in infrared. So this was just at a park over here in Littleton one morning. And so I brought my standard color camera, took this image, and then had my infrared. And you can see these are the same trees, same morning, but you can see that, you know, anything, again, it's the chlorophyll, and that really throws off a completely different look to it with the way that it reflects off that light. And if you look down at the water, again, it's darker than probably what we would see if I just converted a standard color image to black and white. So, you know, what are the things that I look for? What are the scenes that will work good with the, and this, again, speaking more to the landscape side of things. Great, I'll say sometimes great scenes that are in color and standard black and white conversions may not work as well for infrared. And on the flip side of that, it's also true that scenes that may appear drab in color and black and white may not, might be great candidates for infrared. Whereas like infrared or midday light, when we photograph, you know, landscapes and so forth, and there's no clouds and that, it's really, you know, we get kind of those flat images, not very exciting and that, but sometimes those can be the kind of the best scenarios to go out with the infrared camera. Midday light often works really well. So kind of the last bullet on here is, you know, feel free to sleep in a little bit longer than we do when we otherwise try and go up for those sunrise shots.
So if you like to sleep in,
Right. And that's a time to go. Midday or that. Again, going back here. So what I'm still learning and in the process of learning, I've just been doing this since I guess last October, but it's kind of the pre-visualization in that. When you get out to a scene, you know, most of us do this with whenever we're photographing in color and we're using our standard cameras, and that is you go out and you kind of imagine the scene and you're looking for light and you're looking to see, and you have just because our eyes are seeing what we think our camera is going to capture. It's not that difficult to pre-visualize with a standard camera, but then with the infrared, you're out there and you're looking and you're imagining, okay, those trees are going to go white, that sky is going to go dark blue, that water is going to go, or I should say dark, almost black. The water is going to go much darker. So when you're taking those images out there with the infrared camera, it's a whole different way of kind of pre-visualizing. And, you know, to be honest, a lot of times I will still take an image, bring it home, bring it up on the computer. It doesn't look all that fascinating. It's not until I finally get into some of the processing that I kind of then see what, hopefully it develops into what I have intended to go out and get. Here I'm going to go through a couple of examples of just scenes, kind of, again, showing the difference between standard black and white conversion and the infrared. This was just over at local Rocky Mountain Arsenal one morning. It was a little bit after sunrise. Just a standard color shot, not too much going on there. And then this is the same scene. And if you look on the left, that was that color image, this one, just with a straight black and white conversion, Nick Color Silver Effects Pro. And then the one on the right was the one that I took that same, just moments later with the infrared. And if you look, I guess my cursor is up there. If you look over at the infrared side, you can see, even though those plants were pretty dormant, this was a winter scene, but they still picked up, just again, whether there's a little bit of chlorophyll in there in the winter, I'm not sure, but just the plants themselves tend to go a little much lighter than when you look over on the left side, the standard black and white conversion, all of that was fairly dark. So it's not to say one's better than the other, but this one certainly is different from the other. And here I'm going to go through a couple more kind of landscape examples, and I'll just kind of bring them up, once again, just to kind of show the differences. So this was one of the first images that I took with it. I got it like the day before I went. I should say the converted camera got to my house the day before I went up to Wyoming. This is a real popular scene up there at Grand Teton National Park. And, once again, you can kind of see it does provide a lot of contrast with regards to clouds, shadows, light. A little bit, you can see the river down there, what's going on there with the trees. So, and again, I did have a color camera there and took some other images with that. And I like those ones a lot also on that. But this, again, just is kind of a different way of looking at things. We had several of us here tonight, or part of the group went on a workshop a few weeks ago, and we were over at a local park over here in Littleton. And this is one that I took there and converted over to infrared. And again, what you can see here is that there's a lot of, kind of, when I compared this with what I was getting over on my color images that I converted to black and white, a little bit more drama up in the sky, some of what was going on with reflections. But then if you look back there at the trees that are kind of in this line over there, and in this line, some of these trees were just starting to get leaves, but the leaves that they had sort of took on that white look. This is up in Rocky Mountain Park that same morning. I was up at Dream Lake that I showed earlier. But this is just over in... Uh-oh, okay. Technical difficulties, we'll get there. Is that? Yeah, okay, good question. I should have brought that up earlier. So I sent mine off to, I didn't have the notes page here that I had on my other screen. So you send it in, and what they do is they put a filter over the sensor. Like it goes on the inside. And again, you can get it in those different, like I say, what I mentioned, mine's 720 nanometers. You can get them in different types. But it's actually a filter that goes over the sensor. So from the cost standpoint, I think mine was like $375 or so to have it converted. So, and in this case too, it was a brand new camera and that too. You can take one, if you have a backup camera or something like that you don't use very much. That's one consideration you could do. The other thing too is that if later on you get it converted, you decide it's just not for me. I don't want to. I'd rather have that camera converted back over. You can get it reconverted for about, I understand it's like $50 or $100 or so, something like that. They can take that conversion back off of it. But to answer the short answer to your question is that it's a separate infrared filter that actually goes on the sensor itself in your camera. So in this case, it really isn't. I noticed that it's like a little bit darker, or I maybe have to. I don't really have to touch the ISO. It's nowhere near like I said, the filter that you put on the front of the lens. In my case, and I brought mine here, you can afterwards kind of sample it or whatever in that. But it really isn't that much different from, say, my other camera. It's not blocking that much of the light. I think it's a little bit, though. I do notice that I have to, go with maybe a little bit slower shutter speed in that, but not, it's fairly insignificant.
If you go to Spencer Camera's website, they show you all the different filters that they have, and they show you what the images look like, so that you can make a visual assessment.
Right.
Before you have it done.
Depending on whether a higher than number, then
Is that what it is?
That's the higher.
Okay, okay. Yeah. And so to answer your question, mine might be a stop or so, but it's not very significant. It's like I said, I can still handheld, in normal light or whatever, and that.
Does it meter properly?
And mine meters, it seems to meter fairly well. Yeah, yeah. Okay. 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 Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
And
Right.
just for transparency, it
Yep.
does avoid the warranty, right?
I believe it does. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So, I mean, I would just hate for somebody to go out and get it done.
Good-
have something
good
done
point.
And send it back to Nikon. Or Canon, be like,
Right.
not
right,
gonna happen.
Right.
Avoid
So
the warranty.
so there is maybe a bit of a risk there as far as that. So and while we're I guess working on the technical side of it here.
There's,
Go ahead.
I was a Spencer, because I know I've looked at their full spectrum for photography.
Right.
And you can either send them in your own camera, or you can buy one straight from them already done. Because
I believe they do that also. I believe you can just order that. And I don't.
buy a camera ready to go.
Yeah, and I don't know if that is the same price as market price for Nikon Z5 plus what they would charge to convert it, or is there some kind of a, do you get a little bit better of a discount by just having them?
I know with the full spectrum, it was like, I think mostly there was like a model or two older cameras, and you couldn't buy when the Canon 5 before it came out, they weren't selling that right off the bat. Like,
Right.
you only had a 5 before you get something,
Right. And that was the other company. Those are two that I'm aware of, and I've talked to
Or the
others.
light figures that always get out.
Okay. And Spencer's is in Utah.
Yeah,
I'm
Utah,
trying to
yeah.
think of what town it is. So
Near Canab, I think.
I think you're right. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's a good idea. Okay, sorry about that. We had a technical delay there, but I think we're ready to start moving. Let's see here. Okay, yep, there we go. So this was again same morning that I was over there at Rocky Mountain National Park. After going to Dream Lake, I came back down, and this is down in Moraine Park. And again, same thing. If you again looking at that scene, that sky was blue, those trees were green, the water was blue, and you can kind of see what the variance is there. You can see a little bit of the tip of, I guess that's Long's Peak back there in the background. Just over here at Cherry Creek State Park, again, you still get the same kind of effects that you would with your other cameras, as far as looking for a lot of the same kind of scenes. In this case, just had a cloudy afternoon. And you can see that it goes darker down here on the water, but you can also see how just the foliage, even though it was dormant at that time of year, gets a little bit lighter than it would be, certainly much lighter than it would be if I did that in the standard black and white conversion of a standard image. This was also that afternoon over there at Cherry Creek State Park. Again, just kind of see the a couple people that were walking on a path. Very cloudy late afternoon, but again, look at, even though there wasn't that much light coming through, you can see what the effect is over there on those trees in the background and kind of the grasses that were just starting to turn a little bit green at that time. Pikes Peak, this was, my wife and I, we were on our way down to get our second COVID shot and just pulled over. I threw the camera in the car on our way down. But again, this was blue skies were up above. It had just snowed that week before. And again, kind of again, just another illustration of the contrast that you get sometimes with the infrared. Cherry Creek State Park, again, that same afternoon that I took that real cloudy day and that, but again, just, you know, certain things really pop, become real light, and then certain things really go much darker than, you know, what the traditional image would show. So this is a standard black and white conversion. This also was that same evening that several of us were over at a workshop over there in Littleton. So this is just, you know, again, nothing extraordinary, just you know, colored image converted over to black and white. And then this is that same scene, just shot in infrared. So again, you can see a little bit more drama in the sky, a bit darker water, a much different look to what it provided to the trees that were out there. I'll go through these ones here fairly quickly in that, but just kind of, again, when I mentioned earlier that chlorophyll is one of the things that that sort of drive the effects of the reflective light. Here, this again, just sky was blue. These were dormant plants, same place. I spent a lot of time over at Cherry Creek, I guess. But this, you know, a few clouds in the background, but again, you kind of see where you get a little bit more glow there in that than I would with another type of an image. This was, so I got a series of 3 images here that are all of the same thing. This is just succulent plants that were over at our home. It's standard. There's a standard black and white conversion of it, and then infrared conversion. So again, I mentioned that there's some things that, you know, maybe get a little bit too wild here with the infrared. To me, I sort of like this a little bit more, like the tonality in that throughout with the grays and the darks and the lights. But as far as something different, those are different. In this right here was, again, plants. This was just sprouting leaves on our ash tree at home. But again, you know, the greens go light, but what I sort of liked about this too is they kind of took on a little bit of a translucent effect, and you can see sort of the veins and the stems and so forth kind of pop a little bit more than they would in another standard type image. And this is tulips that are out in our front yard. I mentioned earlier too that I was going to try and throw in some images here that of things that in my mind don't necessarily lead themselves to great candidates for infrared photography. And to me, with flowers, I haven't really found a real good use for it, just because in this case, I would rather see the colors or maybe a standard black and white conversion, because in this case, these tulips are orange, red, yellow, you know, kind of that real vibrant color. But when you take it like this, they kind of take on the same color as the stems, and it doesn't really have that much contrast to it. Trees, again, you know, with the leaves and so forth and that, we've already seen some examples of those, but here I've got some that are more specific just to trees themselves. Again, just kind of a comparison, obviously not infrared. I was over here at Daniels Gate Park. I go there every once in a while because it's close to home. A winter morning, and there were a couple of people that were walking their dogs were over there playing in the background. But again, just take a look at the trees. It's, you know, kind of an interesting scene there with the fence and so forth. The same scene whenever you take it with the infrared, again, you can kind of see the effect of what you get with the clouds and the trees. And here again, I'm kind of targeting more the trees for this part of the segment. Same 3 trees, just shot from a different angle, a different day. It was a little bit more, I'll say, moody or whatever, not that day. But again, you can kind of see the real pop to what it does to anything that was green in that scene. Really took on a different look to it. And these trees were actually in fall color. This was just over here in Highlands Ranch, just out for walking the dog that afternoon, and snapped this picture out over there. The moon is also another real good thing to shoot in infrared, and I'll explain why. This was, I know you're getting bored of Cherry Creek State Park, but here you go again. So this was not on the day of a full moon, but it was a day or two after. And at this point, a lot of times when you're like a day or two after and the moon is up above the horizon, the sky is blue, there just isn't very much contrast with the moon. But what I found is with the infrared, that blue in the sky tends to, again, absorb light, whereas the moon still has a nice bright shine to it. So you get a lot of contrast there with the moon on those days that are, like, I'll say a day or two after a full moon or a day or two before the full moon. And this was the same scene just on the next moon cycle. So we'll call it a month later. I just went out kind of did the same scene, but just got a different perspective. And again, this was as the moon was setting, not rising. It was a moon set one morning. And this was actually on a full moon morning, so you don't really have much in the way of light hitting any of your foreground. But that was the image that I was able to get just up there in Genesee, actually. Right. So the infrared works, like you say, well with a little bit more light than your sunrise, sunset. And this one here, by the way, was pre-sunrise, so a little bit before sunrise. So there really wasn't that much natural light. And so without that, the chlorophyll, the greens, they're not getting that reflective light. There's not enough light hitting it to give you that reflective. But yeah, the moon is still getting plenty. I had to make sure, kind of work with the exposure and make sure I didn't blow that out. And the same way we always do with the moon tends to be easy to blow out. But that's the answer to your question. So just you almost want more light versus, like I say, our standard landscape photography. You want that real soft, low light kind of thing. So I'll let you sleep in as part of the deal. So clouds are another thing that I think tend to photograph fairly well in infrared. You get a little bit more drama. This was just, from our backyard. I just took out actually used the 150 to 600 lens and kind of zoomed in on some clouds that were off on the horizon. But there again, you can see the whites go pretty light, the darks go pretty dark. So once again, you get that contrast in there. Once again, Cherry Creek State Park. And this was just a winter, kind of clouds were rolling through, kind of a stormy type scenario in that. But, when I shot it like this, you got at least a little bit of that contrast, a little bit of that lightness in some of that foreground stuff, whereas that wouldn't have been the case if I shot that with the standard camera. This also was from my backyard. I don't necessarily have this view. I had to walk to the very corner of the yard and sneak around to get this. But it was, looking out as a kind of, and this was just a couple weeks ago when some of those clouds were building up. This was like midday, mid-afternoon when you get those clouds that start popping. But once again, you can see some of the, the contrast up there in the clouds, and you can also see what's going on with some of the trees, particularly the ones that have leaves, but those leaves tend to go white. This was out at Grand Teton National Park. And so this was sunset. And what I thought was interesting about this one when I talk about clouds is that some of these kind of little kind of light clouds that are down there close to the ground, those really weren't visible to my naked eye. And when I took some images of this in color and I went back and processed them, they really weren't very pronounced. It was almost not visible in that. But somehow the infrared was picking up some of those rays in different ways than what the other camera was. I'm going to go through this part here really quickly here. Just some of these slides get a little bit busy, but There are some challenges to photographing people. You can get some interesting results, but sometimes interesting isn't necessarily great, right? So, you know, what the deal is that the infrared light, it does penetrate, they say 2 millimeters into the skin. And what that means is that the skin reflects that light and therefore takes on an added glow. Yet veins that are darker take on a darker look. So there's more contrast there between veins and skins shooting infrared. A couple real quick points here. Eyes tend to go really dark. So if you are photographing people and you want to try and get infrared, it is possible, and it is, you know, people do it. I haven't done a lot of it, but the idea is to have them either, you know, facing the sun or use reflectors. Make sure you get some light that comes into the eyes, because otherwise, if they're shadowed at all, they really tend to go dark. And then, right. And I've got a couple images here that'll kind of sort of demonstrate that. But and then another thing is hair can be difficult. Dyed hair, dyes don't take on the same characteristics that natural hair does. So sometimes they can have a different look to them. You know, dark hair will tend to go lighter than what it is in real life. But then red hair and blonde hair go pretty much almost completely white. Blemishes and freckles are less visible with infrared. Again, it's that concept of the infrared light penetrating a couple of millimeters of skin. And then for those that are, you know, doing portraits and so forth, and that the makeup considerations, they say to, I say they, because I haven't done a whole lot of this myself. I'm going off of what the book tells me. But add more makeup than you normally would, and, you know, don't be afraid to use dark colors on some of that makeup. Meaning, they even say like black lipstick, black eyeliner, black eyeshadow, fill in the eyebrows, so that you get some definition in some of those features. And then the last thing I think I have here as far as the text is clothing. Clothing can also be difficult. The idea, or I guess the ideal colors, or stay away from dark colors and go more with the lighter pastels in that. Whites tend to work pretty well just to stay white. And, you know, one of the recommendations was, you know, lay clothes, you know, if you're going to do a photo shoot of people, lay the clothes out ahead of time and see what ones might work in infrared and what ones don't. Take some test shots, because certain dyes are going to just tend to go white, and you're going to maybe end up with something that you wouldn't expect. And then also tattoos are more distinctive, again, because you're getting more glow off of the skin, but the inks that penetrate a little bit further in there are will still stand out a little bit more. So here's some just a few examples. I haven't shot a lot of people with the infrared camera yet, but here's some of what I have done. So these are just standard. This is a color on the left. That same image just converted to standard black and white over on the right. And then the same person with that same dress shot with the infrared camera. So you just see more glow on the skin is one thing there. And, you know, once again, you can see what the difference was in the trees. Dale, you were at this, that afternoon, you set this event up. Oh, thank you. And so, and when I mentioned earlier with eyes, you know, one of the other things I guess I meant to bring up there too is, you know, because eyes can be difficult to shoot, and if you don't have the right light, if you're not going to, you know, try for that, have them just kind of look away where the eyes are not, you know, the main part of the focus. A lot of times on portraits, eyes are what you're all about, but sometimes if you want to try and get some shots of people, have them kind of look a little bit away so that the eyes don't come out, as Darren said, vampire-ish. So this is, she's wearing the same dress in both of these images, the same hat in both of those images, but you can see what, you know, some of the dyed fabrics in that, when it's shot in infrared, will tend to go white. And in this case, the light was not shining in her eyes. She's actually kind of facing the sun, and there's also a building there, but that was all to the back of her, to the back. And if you look in there, the eyes really tended to go real dark when shot in that direction. Yet here, the eyes, she was looking more towards, you know, the sun was now at my back, and so to her face, and at least you can get a little bit more definition of that. They didn't go as dark as they did the other way. Animals, I have to put up a couple pictures of this guy. So this is our dog chasing a ball in the backyard. I don't know if there's anything that interesting about it, but his eyes actually came out pretty good. He certainly was focused on that ball. And this just gives you the example of what he looks like in color. So color to infrared, and there he is, same ball, same horn, a little snow on the nose. But again, you can probably get something. I've taken plenty of black and white images of him also. You can get a little bit of a different look anyways with it, with the infrared. A bison over there, and again, this gate. Didn't have a long lens, but there's a bald eagle over there. Once again, Cherry Creek State Park. And what I've noticed is, you know, the one thing I mentioned that I was going to show some things that haven't been that impressed. I haven't been that impressed with in infrared, but some of the birds and animals in that wildlife, they look sort of blah. This one probably would actually look better in color or a standard black and white conversion. This was just a juvenile red-tailed hawk that was flying around our neighborhood the other day. And then I think architecture. I just took the camera up downtown and kind of walked up and down a couple streets and that. I don't know that this is that much different than what standard black and white would look like, but went ahead and took it anyways and show that. So this was just some windows over at it used to be called the MCI building. I'm not even sure what it's called now, but it's over in the tech center. And what I thought was a little bit interesting with this one is that the windows went darker than they, you know, because you could see through those windows naturally that this was like middle of the day, but they tended to go a little bit darker here with the infrared. Oh, is that so? Okay. Okay. So for those that are on the Zoom call that couldn't hear that, we have a new, hopefully a new member here, and somebody joining us tonight who hopefully will become a new member, who just mentioned that when they built the building, they put on, what was it, infrared absorbing film on the windows at this particular building. He was involved with the working for it, or design or construction, a little bit of all of that. So anyways, great tidbit, thank you. So maybe that's why the windows came out like they did. Downtown, everybody's pretty familiar with this scene. Again, you know, you can see a little bit of the effect there. This wasn't great light and that, but you can kind of see a little bit of the effect there of what this was doing to the trees and the sky and that. And this was middle of the day on a cloudy afternoon. Downtown again, I don't know that there's anything really. The thing that kind of caught me on this one is if you look real closely, the flag up here, you know, again, a dyed fabric or whatever, and that tended to go just like a solid gray. You can't, you know, it's a U.S. flag, but you can't really see that here in that particular image. That MCI building, again, this just kind of demonstrates a little bit of, that was a blue sky. It was like middle of the day, not much going on there, but you get certainly a different look there with regards to the contrast that with the light hitting the buildings and shadows coming across, and that just something a little bit different. Same building, just looking up and getting some reflections that were coming back down at me. And then this is actually is one of the last ones that I have, but everybody is again familiar with Performing Arts Center, these statues that are pretty popular up there. This was middle of the day. That sky was super blue, like the dark blue, but kind of what you normally would see in the middle of the day. And once again, it came out much different in this format than it would in a standard black and white conversion. And then I'll just kind of touch again here real quick on my post-processing. kind of mentioned this earlier on that. Again, capture in RAW, be sure and capture in RAW. They're not very appealing when you come straight out of the camera. So the post-processing is a must. Again, the process that I use typically is Lightroom. I'll bring it back into Photoshop, Mix Silver Effects Pro. Now I will so when I go into Mix Silver Effects Pro, I wanted to touch on this a little bit. For those that are familiar with the program, they have the different presets in that. A couple things that I do is, one is I'll go in and click on the, I think it's the height texture, harsh height texture, I think is one of the presets. Gives it a little bit more pop, a little bit more definition, but then I back down on that structure slider a little bit in that to make it not so crunchy. But then the other key thing that I do is I will go in and they have the color tones on there. And most often the one that I click on there is the blue channel. And on the blue channel, what that does is it tends to really drive those blues to a much darker color. And then I'll adjust that slider accordingly to what looks like it's appropriate. But if I don't have enough time, I don't think, to do a demonstration of it, but of an image. But that would be the process that I would recommend is, and again, experiment with the different presets, experiment with the different sliders in there. But those are the ones that I found to be most useful is the high structure, harsh, back down on the opacity of it a little bit, and then the blue channel, hit that, and then adjust that. But feel free to use the other ones that are in there as well, because you may find something that's more appealing to you. And with that, that's the end of the presentation. And put this one here, I guess there truly is no place like Ryno, right? And this was, again, middle of the day, cloudy day, so at least there were some clouds back out there. And what I thought was a little bit interesting is this one in here. Here you have the sign right there, very legible. You can read it pretty clearly, but a fabric, a dyed fabric, I'm sure. And then right behind it are those other flags that are also dyed fabrics, but for some reason they had a different look to them. They didn't take, they sort of the infrared really treated them differently than that main banner across there. And again, if you look down, kind of down the road there, you can see again, once again, what it's doing to anything that has chlorophyll to it, the plants in that. So with that, I'll open it up, see if anybody has any questions.
And for those of you that are online, we'll try to repeat the questions if they come in the room.
Maybe I overprocessed them.
So the question was, it looks like there's a fringe, a dark fringe around the people. That one, but not that one. The first one was that one right there. Looks almost 3D.
I don't.
You see it on the screen.
Yeah, maybe a little bit
Like
more
it's cut out
so.
almost.
Yeah. And so for those that are on the Zoom, that was Dave Purcell, who of course is a portrait photographer, so would notice these things. So he was mentioning that there, it looks like there's a darker than normal shadow across that, I'll say her left arm, up on the top edge of that. And I see that, but I didn't see it initially, but I don't know if, yeah, so I don't know if that's an infrared, if it's something that the Mix Silver Effects Pro threw into it. It's the outer 2 millimeters of her skin is what was said, is what that might be.
Any other questions from the folks in the field? We have about 8 minutes before the cops show up and run us out of here.
Yeah. So I don't see it there, but maybe it was just a unique way I processed it.
Oh, there's one. Do you ever not convert your infrared to black and white?
I've done a little bit of that. It's a good question. So what again with the conversion that I have, the 720 nanometers or whatever. It's kind of made for, you know, where black and white is sort of the way to go with that. There are, you know, if I have done this before, is in, it works a little bit better in Capture One, where I can identify specific colors and then just deal with one color at a time, and I can push them a little bit one direction or the other. You know, and again, it's not my kind of image. And as I mentioned earlier, in that there are some of those other spectrums in that, the wavelength spectrums that are getting cameras converted in some of the other areas that will provide some more of that sort of wild colors out there. But the short answer to your question is almost all of mine I've done just black and white. I've played around a little bit with trying to bring some of the color out there, but you know, with the 720 nanometers, there just isn't that much color to work with. Yeah, yep, there you go. Right. Yep. So again, we had a member say that it's color channel swaps that you can do to get some of that effect. So that'll be my next project. I'll experiment with that.
Sounds like a workshop on infrared.
I don't know that I'm ready to do the workshop, but
What about
a little bit more experience.
what if you want to try this and get a filter and so on? This is if you really like it or not.
Yep.
What's the adjustments and what's the cost?
Yeah. Great question. So the question there is again is you know, is going with one of these screw-on filters an option if you want to try and experiment and see if it's something you're interested in doing? And I would say yes. The cost is, I think some of those filters are anywhere from like $25, $30 up to, some of them are a little bit more, maybe up into the $80 to $100 range is my understanding. Now again, you could do that, and then where the challenge will be is kind of like, as I was mentioning, like as you're you have to focus and then put it on, and then, you know, again, go with an exposure that would be similar to like if you were using, say, like a pen stop neutral density filter or something like that. So you may be, you know, running a 6, 8, 10 second image, depending upon your other settings, right? ISO and shutter speed and so forth. But you might be going a long shutter. So important to put it on a tripod. And now sometimes that might be real good. You know, to be honest, I've only done a couple of them where I've intentionally gone out and done long exposure to try and get cloud movement and so forth. But that right there, you know, is one of those filters that would just be a natural way to go about that. The issue that you may have is if you have any kind of a breeze and if you're photographing trees and if the leaves are moving, that longer exposure, you're going to get some blur with anything else in the image that you may not want to blur. Same thing as you would with any other kind of a long exposure situation. But like I said, with clouds or water movement or something like that, it might actually be a worthwhile thing to do. A good idea is just to see if you're interested in and get one of those filters and test it out and see what you come back with.
So Cynthia said that she didn't have to take the filter off the folks. I just asked her on chat.
Oh, okay.
I was gonna say, can you do it like with the neutral density filter, right? When you're going 10 stop, they use lag in back the camera.
Yeah,
Usually you can turn it up so you can see through it and make your adjustments.
Right. Similar to like what you guys do with your night photography, right? You push the ISO way up and you get it up way to a point, get your focus, and then back down on those settings and shoot as you otherwise would. Okay.
She said she just moved back from Panama, so she was packed. She can't remember what.
Okay.
That might be some mystery thing we get in December.
Okay. So no, great question. That's something we're considering.
Well, with that, we're gonna end the meeting for the Zoom folks and pack up and head out before the police come in and throw us. Bravo.
So yeah, bye everyone. Thank you again for joining. And again, one quick reminder is that again, the next meeting is July 7th. It's a competition. Themes are portals, windows, and so forth, and water. And water can be, you know, running water, ice, snow, any form of water will work in that. So again, that's the submissions are due actually 4th of July, Sunday, 4th of July, and we'll have our competition on Wednesday, 7th.
Thanks, everybody.
Yeah, and thank you again for everybody for joining.